Hello fellow Ghost Hunters, welcome back to another Ghost Simulator video. In today's video we'll be going over all the stuff that you need to know for the Christmas event. The reason why this video is out is mainly because I've been lazy, but also a little bit because the tower has been promised some new features, and recently some new features have been added, so I felt like this was a good enough time to go ahead and let you guys know all the stuff related to the Christmas event. Now, if you're new to Ghost Simulator, you will spawn over here in Ghost Lobby, and all you need to do to access the Christmas event is actually walk over here to this train, which is actually pretty obviously placed and shouldn't be too much of a problem for you, but I feel like explain it anyways, and then head over to the Christmas event through the teleporter there. Once you get into the Christmas world, it does get a little bit more confusing since there's quite a bit going on, but once you get started on it, it does get pretty self-explanatory. Now, once you get into the Christmas world, you spawn in a lobby very similar to the one in Main Hub, which is kind of nice because you kind of understand what's going on. Ahead of you is one quest line. This quest line isn't really necessary to start the event, but you can go ahead and start it anyways. Now, the reason why I wouldn't recommend starting that quest is because your main objective for the first part of this event will most likely be to go ahead and unlock a door that's locked here. To unlock this, you will need a key fragment 1, 2, and 3, also known as the lock cracker in many of the dialogues of the NPCs themselves. Now, these key fragments can be found in all of these 3 NPCs. Ella over here, or Pink Elf, or whatever her name is in this event, over here. Blue Elf, which is over here in the ice area, or maybe Green Elf. And then the last one can be found over here with the other elf down here. The main head elf here quest doesn't give you a key fragment, but it's a nice quest to go ahead and complete, so you can work on that once you complete the other 3. But my main objective for the first part would be to go ahead and complete those 3 quest lines. Now, for all those quest lines, you will need to be vacuuming quite a bit of ghosts. If you're a new player, it shouldn't be too much of a struggle, and if you're a long-term player, it should be really easy. Only recommendations are you can either use loot gum or vacuum gum to actually make vacuuming ghosts a little bit more profitable or take a little less time. If you use vacuum gum, it is actually quite helpful because if you use it, you can go ahead and pretty much instantly vacuum the ghost, or at least do it a lot quicker than if you weren't using it. I recommend using loot gum because the main limiting factor when you are grinding these ghosts is generally going to be the respawn time of them. But you can go ahead and use either or 2 of those gums to make the ghost grinding you're doing here a little bit more bearable. Now, once you complete with all those 3 quests and do unlock this area, you gain access to the main part of the Christmas event for pretty much every player, which is actually the tower. Towers this year, if you watch any of my previous event and videos, are actually a little bit different. Rather than consisting of a few ghost floors with boss floor every other floor, or every 2 floors like they have been in previous events, this event actually has a mixture of a few random floors before you get into a boss floor. More specifically, there are a total of 6 floors in each tower, with the first 5 comprised of either a race floor, an Obvi Floor, or a ghost floor, and the last 6th one being always a boss floor, which can also be a random variation of either Nutcracker, Scrooge, and Fluffy. Now, of the different floor types, the most common one is actually the ghost floor, where a lot of ghosts go ahead and spawn in a series of rooms, and your goal is to, throughout those, is just to vacuum all the ghosts and get rid of them, and then go ahead and move on to the next floor. It's a pretty simple one in the exact same as previous years, and it's pretty easy to do as long as you have a few of the perks or know how to pretty easily dodge all attacks, which you can actually do without any perks by just going ahead and keep walking. Since you do outrun the bullets, as long as you aren't lagging, they won't catch up to you, and you'll pretty much get through these pretty easily, even solo, as a new player, without taking too much damage. But like most things in Ghost Simulator, this floors can actually become quite a bit easier if you have a few perks. For instance, having multiple streams can make it really easy to go ahead and go through some of these ghosts, because instead of having to wait on one ghost for you to vacuum, you can go ahead and keep moving and grab up to 5 ghosts, which can be really helpful. Another helpful thing is to have the overcharge ability from Rowan, which can help you clear large groups of ghosts pretty quickly, but none of these are strictly necessary. Now, I would recommend for anyone playing this event themselves, if you're at all good at this game, going into a private server will almost definitely be the way to go. And the main thing is because of the other floor types being the obby and the race, require everyone to complete it before the the floor will move on, which means that you can end up waiting for a whole 5 minutes until the auto teleport timer kicks in, which is just a lot of time wasted and not really worth doing it in multiple servers to make ghost floors a little bit easier. The next type of floor there is an Obvi Floor. This will generate a random series of up to 5 obbies for you to go through, each with having some lava underneath that you'll have to avoid touching, or else you'll take quite a bit of corruption. Now, these aren't too difficult if you just take your time, but it can be a little bit long and obnoxious to do. My advice here would be to just take it slow and do it at a speed that you're comfortable with, and try not to fall off. But if you do end up falling off, one of the things you'll need to do is not to panic. If you fall off, you need to go run to the closest ladder and start climbing as fast as you can, because the damage that you'll take from the floor is actually quite a bit, and may end up making the difference between being able to easily complete a run and losing immediately. Another thing to note is that you can actually cheese a few areas, since there are ladders at the end, so you can actually save a little bit of time if you want to on some of the floors by just running to the ladder, rather than actually doing the obby as intended. Now, this isn't really something I would really advise doing, since most of you guys probably are going to struggle a little bit with keeping your corruption, especially considering how difficult some of these obbies may be, but it is something that you guys can keep in mind. One thing I forgot to mention about obby floors is that actually having the more agility perk is extremely helpful, because you are able to jump a little bit higher and move a little bit faster, which allows you to clear some gaps that you otherwise wouldn't be able to clear. Another thing to note is that hoverboards do not work, but you are able to use some gums if you think those will be helpful. The main one that I think might be at all useful would be either basic zoom gum or basic bunny gum. Any more than that and you end up just going way too fast. But those gums aren't really necessary, since I feel like the obbies are pretty easy, even for people without more agility game pass. And the last floor type that you have is actually these race floors. We're kind of racing against this red border to finish the tower. Now, on these floors, you can actually go ahead and use your hoverboard, so you have a pretty good way of going fast. And there should be some signs to help point you in the right direction. But from my few little tests of this, it seems to be pretty obvious which way to go, as long as you go ahead and you both follow the signs and just keep moving away from that red wall, since it seems to follow you pretty nicely. These do seem to be a little bit confusing, especially when you run into some stuff which have those chain link fences, but for the most part, you shouldn't have too much struggle finishing them. Really, the only struggle is when you get to places like this where it isn't really obvious where you're going, since there are multiple paths. But this is the exit, and to finish, you actually need to go ahead and go in here. For this, it looks like some perks will be super helpful, mainly having the hoverboard and the hoverboard turbocharger to speed up your hoverboard speed will be super helpful. But also I've found myself using the jetpack that you get from Ghost Hunter Riley and Backdoor. Very helpful. But yeah, for the most part, it looks like these floors should be pretty self-explanatory for most of you, so I don't think I'll go too in-depth on all the different variations of the obbies, ghosts, or race floors, since they seem to be pretty easy to figure out. And now, as I said, for the final floor, you will be taking on a random boss difficulty, with only different variations being some different attacks and some of them have that are a little bit harder to dodge or do a little bit more damage than the other ones. All in all, they shouldn't be too hard to do as long as you keep shooting the boss whenever possible and try to stay near the boss so you can manage to complete the vacuum cycles when the boss falls, rather than somehow missing them due to being too far away when the boss goes ahead and drops. Now again, like the ghost floors, there are a lot of helpful perks that can help you in this. Some of the main ones would definitely be having the hoverboard turbocharger that allows you to go around faster, but also some like the jetpack from Riley. Now all of these bosses have some different attacks, and it will be helpful to actually know these attacks. Unfortunately, at this moment, I'm not going to be going through all the towers and all the attacks, because it might take some time for me to go over them, and most of them are pretty self-explanatory if you played the game before, and even if you haven't played the game before, they still are pretty self-explanatory. The only maybe confusing attack that might be in the cycle of all three of the bosses, you guys probably saw right at the beginning of that fight, would have been the laser attack that some of the bosses do. If the boss is chasing you with the laser, yellow for Nutcracker. I think Scrooge has another yellow one from his star, and I don't think Fluffy has a yellow one from its chest. If it's chasing you with that laser attack, you need to get as close to the boss as possible and then walk in circles, because the boss can't track you super easily when you are too close to it, and since it only has a fixed rotational movement. Now, the thing about the bosses is the boss, every single time you defeat it, will drop a single event key, which is the main thing you are going to be doing the towers for. Since with those event keys, you can buy these cool mythicals and also these other cool items in some key chests. Going for a mythical can be really cool to remember later, and really it's up to how much you guys really want to grind. Now, when it comes to key drops, there's actually 2 sources of keys that you get from each tower. You get both the boss drop, where you get, as I said, you get 1 key base from the boss, and then you also get another 3 keys from completing the tower itself as sort of a completion bonus. Those additional 3 keys are actually just added to your inventory. There's no pop-up or anything, so it is a little bit confusing for new players. Go ahead, do a tower, get 1 key from the boss, and then for some while later look at their inventory and realize they have 4 keys now. Now, this is a list that I've created to kind of explain this. It's actually really helpful if you just kind of crop it and then look at whatever you need. But the main thing is, up here we have the different types of drops that you get. For base, you get 1 from the boss, and then 3 from the completion for the total of 4. With the boss drops game pass, you get ×2 on the boss keys for 2 total from that, which is pretty much just an additional key from it. But with the event pass, you end up getting 1 additional key from the boss. This isn't a multiplier, so it's only +1 key no matter whether or not you're running boss gum, which, as you can see here, has a wide variety of different amounts that you can give you. But you only get an additional key from that, but you get another 3 additional keys from the completion, for a total of 4 additional keys from here. What this looks like is that for free to play, you have a total of 4 keys normally. If you have the double boss drops game pass, you end up with 5 keys. If you have the event pass, you end up with 8 keys. And if you have the boss drops and the event pass, you'll end up getting 9 keys from each tower. Additionally, you can also use glitchy boss gum or other boss gums to go ahead and increase the amount of keys that you get from the boss drop itself. But I personally don't feel like that's super worthwhile with how many keys you can get with just the event pass without having to burn through any supply of boss gums that you may have. And so for this event, if you are planning on grinding a whole lot of towers, like 20, 30 or something like that, I would recommend going ahead and getting the event pass, because by doing that, you pretty much double the amount of keys that you get, going from 4 free to play to 8 if you have the event pass. So really only with a small difference of going only from 5 to 9, which isn't quite double if you do already have the boss drops. But yeah, for new players, I'd recommend, though, if you're only going to be playing the tower a few times, definitely don't buy the event pass, especially considering the pet that you get from it really isn't much better than a lot of recent code pets, and the fact that usually this stuff for trading wise is pretty much worthless. On top of the snowflakes, like, no one really ever cares about snowflakes anyways. But yes, that's the key drops in a nutshell. It is a little bit confusing. I would recommend going and reading through that list, trying to figure out what that list says. The main thing that you do want to go ahead and pay attention to on this list is just go kind of figure out what you're going to be doing for the event, and then just figure out how many keys you'll get from that. Then see if you buying the event pass is worth it. But yeah, it's a pretty complicated mess with how drops are handled. So I don't blame you if you ask for help in the comment section. Now, the last thing that I haven't quite covered yet, which is still something that you guys might want to think about, is actually the snowflakes that you get from the from Ghost and from the Ghosts and the Ghost Floors. It can actually be used to purchase some stuff from the shop. Most of you guys are probably figured this out yourself, but there are quite a few cool things that you can buy here. Pool is probably being the gift spider from there, since that's the most expensive, and the godly from here, which is also not too difficult to get. Because, though I don't know how hard or easy these things are for all players, I personally don't struggle too much with it, but I'm also usually burning a lot of glitchy loot gum. I have pretty much all luck multipliers. It isn't easy for me to say how easy those will be to get. But the other thing that you can get a source of items that might actually be quite cool is actually over here in the crafting station. There's crafting recipe 1 and 2 currently. They'll probably be adding more in the next update, like they did with Halloween. Crafting recipe 1, you already have all the items given for it, so as long as you can figure out where these items are and get them yourself, you should be able to craft that one and get kind of an introduction to how crafting works. But the second one gets a little bit more complicated because it has these grayed out ones that just say board. I know a lot of new players don't quite understand what this means. They assume that when it says board, it'll take any board. For these 2 different boards, you actually need specific boards that you can actually figure out usually pretty easily from the hint down here and the name maybe too. So try to look at the hint here, figure out the names of stuff especially, and see which ones will be used for that. These items are generally not tradable, which is kind of unfortunate, but they are kind of some of the cooler items that you can get, and kind of unique because they do require a few items to craft. For this event, I'd recommend newer players mainly just focusing on not the crafting, because crafting can get a little bit confusing and quite expensive pretty quickly. So if you're focusing on getting a recipe, you may end up having to spend a lot longer than if you're just focusing on getting some cool items from some of the Christmas crates or also the boards that you can purchase. Now, the last thing that there is I swear this is the last one this time, is this snowflake converter, where you can actually turn in the snowflakes that you have this year into ghostly gum. Although this is a conversion for gum, and gum is really overpowered in Ghost Simulator as it is, I wouldn't recommend doing it because there's just so much better options getting cool items that you can get from the shop, working on crafting recipes with those snowflakes. There's not really any reason to go ahead and convert them, especially with how it's been recently, where you're able to turn in older items for actually a better rate. So with current items, you can go ahead and turn in for a 50 to 1, but with older items, all you need is a 25 to get one, which is a 50 to 2 ratio. So it's just so much better to just save those items, in my opinion, because having them in your inventory can be a small flex that says that you play that event, and they're also really, you aren't going to get too much use out of the ghostly gum that you do get from it anyways. And with that, I think that is all the information you guys need to finish this Christmas event and have fun in it. If you guys think I've missed anything or you have other questions to ask, go ahead and leave them in the comments. Since there is likely something I've missed, especially regarding specifics on floors, since there may be 1 or 2 that a lot of people find confusing, and so it might be nice to have that in the comments. Same thing if you're coming to this video later than like a day or something, go ahead and check there, see if any of your questions have been asked, and if the answer is already sitting there. And yeah, with that, hopefully this video is helpful, and I'll see you guys probably during some streams when I grind the tower for myself. Bye! This better not be another non-race floor. I've been through 2 towers almost already. I can't get 10 floors in a row that aren't race.